what's clear to me and probably to everybody who was watching a presentation is how much, I would say 90 or probably maybe 99% of what would be good for people with disabilities would also be good for the general public. And I think it's a good thing to remember when people try to present that as somehow conflicting interests. I also want to point out before my short presentation is up that the Hong Kong recent focus on just adding lifts to access pedestrian bridges is not necessarily the best solution for universal accessibility or the most pressing universal accessibility issue in Hong Kong. I just want to touch very quickly on the good, the bad, and the evil in walking in Hong Kong. I'm saying this as someone who's been walking in Hong Kong for 10 years, as someone who loves to walk. The good, bringing you close to your destination so you don't actually have to walk very much. And that's a good comment about our public transport system. We all know it's great. The trains, the buses, the minibuses, the ferries, the taxis. The reason it's so good is because you're never too far from a bus stop. And again, the good thing is there is public transport to take you there. The bad thing is you are not expected to walk very far. You're only expected to walk as far as the bus stop or the ferry terminal or the MTR station. The pretty good, walking access to services. Some of you may be familiar with the idea of WalkScore, which is a system invented in the US where basically wherever you are, based on GPS, it tells you how close you are to various services, shopping, schools, and so on, and ranks your location. It's very useful as a way of evaluating property values. And as you can see, some cities in the US are very green, which means you're very close to everything. Some are very red, which means you have to drive to get pretty much anywhere. New York is a great case of a very, very green city in that sense. You can walk everywhere. But people today publish their property by giving their walk score, not just in New York, but everywhere in the US. And it's a great way to measure walkability as something that actually enhances property value. How Hong Kong would score, we don't quite know. It's a bit, at least, it's a bit difficult to measure it in the same way as in the US and other Western cities. But generally speaking, you can say that most places in Hong Kong are close to most services, whether it looks like this, or it looks like that, or it looks like this, which is some of the housing estates that have their own shopping facilities, or ultimately if it looks like this, which is, you know, the typical MTR development with the shopping downstairs and housing on top. So it's convenient. And then, of course, developments like this. The bad, strategic walking. Hong Kong does not encourage strategic walking. By strategic walking, I mean walking for a long distance. And that's the flip side of what I said earlier, as opposed to walking to the nearest MTR station or to the nearest bus stop. It's interesting to compare New York to Hong Kong. Both were sort of started around the same time, or at least Manhattan. It was laid out, the bulk of it, around the time Hong Kong was founded. The difference is that Manhattan continued to develop itself and to lay itself out in a way that created a very pedestrian-friendly environment, like this, which is this kind of like undifferentiated grid where people can walk wherever you want for as long as they want without expecting to be stopped by a highway or other various miscellaneous barriers. Hong Kong, which started out in a similar fashion, some of the old parts, turned into something like this. Paul showed you this, I think, briefly also. This is the Hong Kong area with all the various barriers and bridges and so on. So needless to say, not a very convenient walking environment. The result is, in New York, an 800-meter distance can be traversed in essentially infinite number of ways, because you can basically choose any path you do. And this is something, I go to New York often, and this is exactly what I do. In Hong Kong, by comparison, 800 meters, let's say from the Grand Hyatt, this is just a speak I gave in the Grand Hyatt, to Pacific Place, a similar distance. With all the barriers, the various limited crosswalks, and the pedestrian bridges, there are exactly, we did measure that, exactly 2 ways to do that. Okay, so when it gets to walking beyond the, the 2-minute walk to the bus stop or the MTR station, you're facing great difficulties in Hong Kong and very few choices. As I said earlier, choices are maybe a problem, I think, for some of the engineers in charge of designing our urban mobility, because choice is very hard to predict and it's very hard to model. So, it's better maybe to have less choice because it's easier to manage. Getting there, that's the evil part. Getting there is not fun at all. You know the saying, getting there is half the fun. Not in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, well, this is New York. You know, people can walk side by side and tell jokes to each other. This is, I believe, in Paris. This is in Tokyo. Again, New York. You know, you can actually look at people. You can have a sidewalk cafe and interact with the world. You can see things. You know, you can dwell, as Paul was saying. In Hong Kong, you can't do any of these things. It's just not fun. It's crowded. It's empty, or it's empty, right? It's over-engineered. It's over-engineered and empty. It's sterile. It's mean. It's over-commercialized. And in the end, yes, this is what we have. So what we have is people are engineered to walk on pedestrian walkways in a very unpleasant environment, and look at the luxury, meanwhile, that our motor vehicles enjoy just below. Thank you very much.